1946. This clever design, which was the source of controversy for many years, was powered by 4 pusher engines and was intended to carry a crew of 9 in the pressurized center section, for its shape barely allowed the word fuselage to be applied. However, the radical new shape, which relied upon flaperons on the end of each wing in lieu of a conventional tailplane, was never to completely overcome stability shortcomings. But the flying wing must surely go down in history as one of the most brilliant aviation concepts ever conceived. The first XB-36 was wheeled out of the experimental hangar just 6 days after Japan surrendered, but it was to be August 1946, nearly 5 years after it was ordered, before the Peacemaker was to be ready to fly. The prototype's single main wheels were 100 inches in diameter and the largest ever made for an aircraft, but this was to prove a major weakness. The 6 pusher-type engines were to have their air intakes on the forward section of the wings. However, this advanced concept for the time was also to provide initial difficulties in cooling the engines and would require later modification. On August the 8th, 1946, the first XB-36 under the command of Captain Beryl A. Erickson rolled down the Fort Worth runway with a total crew of 9 and 8,000 gallons of fuel. At exactly 10 minutes past 1 in the morning, he lifted Convair's giant aerial masterpiece into the air for the first time. It was the biggest plane ever to fly, even in Texas. The flight was to continue for no more than 37 minutes, during which time the undercarriage was to remain in the wheels down position as a safety precaution. Erickson's crew on this and many subsequent occasions were to put the giant aircraft through many vigorous tasks which quickly identified the problems of giantism. One of the most formidable being the vibration caused by such enormous engines spaced out over the wide distances of the wing, and cooling was another problem, especially at high altitude. It was obvious that there would be many areas requiring major attention. But perhaps the most fundamental was the simple concept of the massive wheel arrangement which limited Convair's bomber to runways at least 22 inches thick, and as there were only 3 of these available anywhere in America, clearly an answer needed to be found, and found quickly. The answer came in what was considered another breakthrough by combining 4 56-inch wheels into a group under each wing, thus spreading the B-36's phenomenal weight over the much wider area, thereby permitting the Peacemaker to use runways of half the previously required thickness. Very early in the B-36 concept, Convair could see the potential of utilizing its enormous wings and tailplane for the transport version of the Peacemaker's commercial cousin, the XC-99, which was ready for its maiden flight in November 1947. Still larger again than its bomber counterpart, the 99 was assembled at Convair's San Diego operation, but with wings and other common parts shipped across the nation from Fort Worth. Here at Lindenberg Field, what had now become the world's largest plane was to demonstrate the potential that would lead to the mammoth transport and airline concepts that followed decades later. The 99 was to attract considerable attention by Pan Am, who seriously considered a civil version for the West Coast to Hawaii run. and actually took out options on 3 such aircraft. But as predicted, the early post-war airline boom was not to transpire for many years. The XC-99 was never to see civil service, and the sole example produced remained in active service with the Air Force until 1957, and became particularly invaluable during the Korean War, when it was used to rush essential payloads from one side of the nation to the other. This aircraft too had to be modified with a new undercarriage system, but when it was, it proved extremely versatile and had, if required, the potential to lift 400 fully equipped troops. Yet, practically, it was just too soon for its time. However, Convair's main interest had always been with the extra long-range bomber concept, and it continued to develop and refine the B-36 throughout the late 40s, emphasizing that this weapon alone provided the ultra-long range to strike virtually any target in the world and return to its base in America. Long range would require many hours of physical endurance for the crew, and therefore inside the 36's massive fuselage, adequate provision was made for sleeping quarters and a galley complete with a 2-burner stove. Ample provisions were always provided. However, the center pressurized section which held these amenities was actually no less than 80 feet from the forward control area, which was only accessible via a narrow tunnel spanning the distance. Heated food was packed in specially designed containers for conveying between the vast distances of the 2 pressurized sections. The tunnel also served as the only means to convey personnel from one crew section to another, and because of the distances involved, a small trolley was provided to enable each member to propel himself more effectively. Problems generated by the size of a 36 also required other unique procedures never previously required by other aircraft. Immediately after takeoff and before the plane was pressurized, a crew member was given the responsibility of examining certain vulnerable areas within the massive interior structure which formed the fuselage of the 36. Only then would the plane be allowed to climb to higher altitudes and continue with its mission. Other problems in dealing with the size of the 36 came to light. There was the question of how to service each of the massive aircraft, which was so big that special outdoor hangars had to be constructed so that only the essential parts could be accessible. And although the problems of engine vibration and cooling had been successfully resolved, there is no doubt that there were grave concerns with the viability of the B-36 in competition with other alternatives. Firstly, the project's original competitor, the Flying Wing, had been upgraded to an all-jet aircraft, replacing the 4 propellers with 8 turbojet engines. Northrop hoped to increase the speed and viability of its quite brilliant concept, which utilized unique flaperons, shown here at the end of the wing, to make up for the absence of the conventional tailplane. Another and more conventional competitor of the 36 also came from the past. This was the Boeing B-50. The aircraft was really just a standard superfortress of Second World War vintage, but with more powerful engines and extended range from the underwing mounted fuel tanks. This range was enhanced yet again by Boeing's successful development of aerial in-flight refueling. Thus the Air Force had available to it a proven aeroplane combination which could fly the same range as the 36 but without having to address the problems of giantism. By the late 40s, due to these innovations, the future of the B-36 looked very bleak indeed. Its salvation came from two major developments. The first one, poetically enough, was also provided by Consolidated's long-term competitor Boeing. For Boeing developed the successful medium-range bomber entirely powered by jets,